space on that side.
Well, why don't you go?
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Good idea. We'll make that all right.
Yeah, let's get a photo of you too. Pretty good right there.
And you're just standing in front of the You'll literally stand here. Every group is pulled up.
Well, yes. There were a lot of notes. There were a lot of
Be all
My great uncle, Lord Mayor of Nottingham. Wow. So you don't mind if I borrow that for a while? I seem to remember a picture of something about that last.
Do you want us to sit down?
Yeah, I think we're gonna start in like 1 minute. 1 minute.
Unless they're in jail.
Yeah, we do that kind of.
We do that.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Fred Ryan, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Reagan Foundation and Institute, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this morning for this special celebration in honor of Ronald Reagan's return to London. As we begin, I'd like to recognize a few special guests who are with us this morning. From our Board of Trustees of the Reagan Presidential Foundation Institute, Kathy Bush, Michael Castine, Peggy Noonan, John Rogers, and Ben Sutton. Thank you for making the trip over. And where's Andrew Littlefair? Right here, I'm sorry. All right. Who's related to the Lord Mayor of another part of the UK. So especially happy to have him back. Also a special welcome to the members of Parliament who are with us and the councillors of the City of Westminster who've joined us this morning. And we have several former members of Parliament and United States Congress, and thank you all for joining us as well. I'd like to now ask Royal Air Force Lakenheath Honor Guard to present the colors. Thank you. Please be seated. 14 years ago, many of us who are here today had the honor of dedicating a statue of President Ronald Reagan here in Grosvenor Square. At that time, it stood in front of the United States Embassy, but a few years ago, the embassy was moved, and because of the construction that followed, the statue had to be temporarily relocated. But today, he is back in a place of pride here in central London, and I will say he really doesn't look a day older. And I wish I could say something like that about some of the rest of us. But our purpose here today is to do more than rededicate a statue. We're here to honor a legacy of freedom, and that, after all, is what the statue represents. It's more than a monument to a man. It's a tribute to the ideas and the values that he championed, principles and beliefs that are timeless and every bit as relevant today as they were when he was elected 4 decades ago. The statue was first dedicated on President Reagan's 100th birthday, so it's fitting that we rededicate it during the 100th birthday of his ally, his friend, his political soulmate who championed the values and ideas that he did, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. President Reagan's partnership with Lady Thatcher and with Great Britain is so clearly reflected by the fact that the very first guest he invited to the White House as a newly elected president was Margaret Thatcher. And if you had the privilege of being there, you would have seen the warmth, the respect, and appreciation that those two transformational leaders had for each other. And at the conclusion of his successful 8 years as president and the many historic accomplishments that occurred, Ronald Reagan invited his partner in so many of those accomplishments to be his final guest at the White House. So rather than try to find my own words today to pay tribute to President Reagan, I will use those of Lady Thatcher, and these are from her eulogy at President Reagan's funeral. She said, "In his lifetime, Ronald Reagan was a cheerful and invigorating presence, that it was easy to forget what daunting historic tasks he set himself. He sought to mend America's wounded spirit, to restore the strength of the free world, and to free the slaves of communism. These causes were hard to accomplish and heavy with risk, yet they were pursued with almost a lightness of spirit, for Ronald Reagan also embodied another great cause, which Arnold Bennett called the great cause of cheering us all up. His policies had a freshness and optimism that won converts from every class and every nation, and ultimately from the very heart of the evil empire. President Reagan left us a more peaceful and prosperous world and stronger alliances. His leadership broke down barriers, including literal ones like the Berlin Wall, a piece of which is embedded in this statue. And so the challenge for all of us is much greater than just keeping this statue standing tall and shining bright. The challenge is whether we do our part to advance the cause of peace and freedom, and those who pass by here each day in Grosvenor Square will be reminded of the work that lies before us and the history that unites us and inspires us. That work requires a strong and vibrant partnership between the United States and the United Kingdom. Well, our first speaker today was elected the Right Worshipful Lord Mayor of Westminster in May of this year. It's fitting he's with us today because not only is he the sitting Lord Mayor of where this statue resides, but also because he was first elected to the Westminster City Council in 1982 while Ronald Reagan was in office. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Lord Mayor of Westminster, Paul Dimmenbold.
Thank you, Fred. Good morning, Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honour to join you all today in Grosvenor Square, a place at the heart of the city of Westminster that has long stood as a symbol of the deep and enduring friendship between the United Kingdom and the United States of America. Today, as we rededicate the statue of President Ronald Reagan, and as we mark 100 years since the birth of his close ally and friend, Baroness Margaret Thatcher, we commemorate their lives and friendship. But we also celebrate something far greater, something which they in their close bond truly embodied the special relationship between our two nations, our partnership built on shared values, shared sacrifices, and shared hopes for the future. Few places in London capture that bond quite like this square. For generations, Grosvenor Square has been known as the Little America of London. It was the home to John Adams when he became the first US ambassador to the court of St. James, and it later became home to the United States Embassy. It has been a gathering place for Americans and Britons in moments of triumph and tragedy alike. From this very square, GIs gathered and prepared to deploy to Europe during the Second World War. And here, Londoners stood in heartbroken solidarity with America after the 9/11 terror attacks. And now it is a fitting home to these memorials to some of the most impactful and influential presidents in the history of America. Franklin D. Roosevelt, who together with Sir Winston Churchill crafted the special relationship as we know it. Dwight D. Eisenhower, and of course, President Reagan, a man whose vision and friendship helped strengthen the transatlantic alliance for a new age. Ronald Reagan believed deeply in the power of friendship. His partnership with Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was more than a meeting of political minds. It was a personal, profound, and effective friendship between kindred spirits. They first met in 1975, several years before either would assume their high offices. Their meeting was supposed to be brief, but ended up lasting more than 90 minutes. It was the start of a mutual admiration that would come to give new energy and new life to the special relationship. Such was the strength of that special relationship that it persevered even during times of strain. When Mrs. Thatcher wrote a letter to President Reagan over his position on the Falklands War that was so furious, a State Department desk officer said it would have, quote, broken diplomatic relations with any two countries, end quote. President Reagan's reaction was simply, well, that's Maggie. President Reagan's relationship with Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II reflected another deeply human dimension of that special relationship. Many of us still remember the President's visit to Windsor Castle in 1982, when he became the first serving American president to stay as a guest of the Queen. And the sight of the two of them riding horses side by side in the Great Park remains one of the most charming images of Anglo-American friendship in modern times. The special relationship is not an abstract phrase. It lives in our history, in our institutions, and in the countless ties of family, culture, and friendship that bind our peoples together. It has carried us through war and through peace, through challenge and through change, and it continues to shape our world today. President Reagan once said that, quote, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on. The special relationship helps ensure that freedom is fought for, protected, and handed on. It is a living partnership, renewed by each generation, and it is a great honor to celebrate that partnership with you all today. I want to thank Fred Ryan and the Reagan Foundation for the hard work making this ceremony happen and their dedication in preserving this memorial. I also wish to extend warm greetings to His Excellency Ambassador Stevens and the Right Honourable Kemi Badenoch MP for being with us today. Your presence speaks to the continuing vitality of our alliance. As we rededicate this statue, let it remind all who pass through this square, Londoners and visitors alike, that the special relationship endures, not because of politics, but because of people, because of the millions of lives, stories, and friendships that connect our two nations. Long may that special relationship continue to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Earlier this year, Warren Stevens was confirmed as the United States Ambassador to the Court of St. James's. Ambassador Stevens, who comes from a successful career in business, has made a commitment to further strengthening the long-standing special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. He and his wife, Harriet, bring great energy, leadership, and the very best in American values to this important role. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Warren Stevens.
Lord Mayor, you've taken some of my remarks literally, so I won't subject this audience to a redundancy of those comments, but thank you very much. And thank you, Fred, and good morning to everyone. Harriet and I are honored to be here today to help celebrate our 40th president. One of our very first engagements in the UK was the rededication of George Washington's statue in Trafalgar Square. So today, it is great to be here in another square with another American hero. The fact the United Kingdom provides such prominent places to honor America's leaders is a true symbol of our friendship. I want to acknowledge those from the UK government who have joined us today. Thank you to the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition and to the Lord Mayor of Westminster for showing their support by being here. And thank you to the Ronald Reagan Foundation for making this event possible. Ronald Reagan was, in the truest sense, a pioneer. He was the first to make the jump from showbiz to the White House. And when asked how an actor could be president, famously responded, "How could a president not be an actor?" Despite that wit, Reagan's leadership extended far beyond theatrics. He was a pioneer for prosperity, creating 20 million jobs, slashing taxes, and overseeing the third largest peacetime economic expansion in U.S. history. President Reagan's election came at a critical time in America and in the world. I remember starting out my business career in 1981, a time when without a doubt an economic and political malaise hung over our country. Inflation was soaring, unemployment was high, interest rates were crushing the economy, and the Vietnam War cast a long, unwelcome shadow over the national mood. The Soviet Union seemed to be ascending, and the United States was not. So when a charismatic, hopeful, and confident leader from California came onto the scene, it really did feel like morning in America. And then things just got better and better and better. Together with Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, President Reagan oversaw a decade of global growth and international trade with their economic policies and his unique brand of Reaganomics. But it is important to note that President Reagan was not just a pioneer for prosperity, he was a pioneer for peace. If you had told me in 1981 that the Berlin Wall would fall without a shot being fired, I wouldn't have believed you. yet it did. This is in no small part due to President Reagan's peace through strength approach, his stewardship of the American economy, and his unique ability to articulate a compelling, hopeful vision of a free society, the merits of which were clear to anyone who had seen life on both sides of the Berlin Wall. And even before the wall came down, he oversaw perhaps the largest reduction of weapons between the U.S. and Soviet Union through his arms reduction treaties, particularly the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or the INF. This treaty eliminated an entire class of nuclear weapons. The plaque for this statue contains a fragment of the infamous Berlin Wall that Fred mentioned, a lasting reminder of the peace Reagan fought to attain. And his likeness continues to stand over our embassy in Berlin, just by the Brandenburg Gate, where Reagan delivered that famous line, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." So he was a pioneer for prosperity, a pioneer for peace, and finally, Ronald Reagan was a pioneer for this partnership. In 1982, Ronald Reagan became the first United States president to address the House of Commons on the personal invitation of his friend, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Their friendship perhaps did more to strengthen the special relationship than any other. It was a friendship that was as fiery as it was warm. The Lord Mayor mentioned the letter from Prime Minister Thatcher about the Falklands, and he did indeed say, well, that's Maggie. Yet when push came to shove, the United States came down decidedly on the side of our historic ally, the United Kingdom. And I'm sure the whole world noticed. I certainly did. Theirs was a true friendship, and one that embodied the very best of the special relationship. Robust, endearing, enduring, and unbreakable. I'm proud to represent that relationship today on behalf of President Trump as he takes up Reagan's mantle as a pioneer for prosperity, peace, and partnership. President Trump's strong leadership has been consequential, from the U.S.-UK economic prosperity deal signed in May to the Gaza peace deal signed earlier this week. And just last month, President Trump was truly honored at his historic second state visit at Windsor Castle. President Trump has great respect for the United Kingdom, and both of our nations are better because of it. As we do this important work, we are proud to stand in the shadow of this great pioneer, Ronald Wilson Reagan, whose life, values, and achievements continue to guide us today. May God bless you all. May God bless the United States and the United Kingdom. And may God continue to bless our very special relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Our final speaker today is Kemi Badenoch, Member of Parliament and a prominent figure in British politics. She often speaks of the enduring values championed by President Ronald Reagan. As leader of the Conservative Party, Ms. Badenoch has been a powerful advocate for free markets, opportunity, and national sovereignty, principles that align with President Reagan's vision of limited government and personal responsibility. Her work continues to inspire a new generation of leaders across the Atlantic, and her presence here today underscores the deep and lasting bond between our nations, rooted in shared ideals and a mutual commitment to freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tory Party leader Kemi Badenoch.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Fred, for that wonderful introduction. It's a real pleasure to be speaking after both the Lord Mayor and Ambassador Stevens. Your stories, your memories of the 1980s, and also just that reinforcement of what a special relationship the US and the UK have is something that we must never, ever forget. And it is wonderful to have President Reagan back. London has been poorer without him the last few years. And looking at it now, it really captures President Reagan's imposing stature, his good looks. I do think we need to bring movie star good looks back to politics. I'm doing my best. But not many people know that I actually lived for a while in Omaha, Nebraska, when President Reagan was president. Between 1985 and 1986, I was in first grade at Boyd Elementary, and I still have recollections of what an icon President Reagan was. There are so many profound events which happened during that time. As a 6-year-old, I remember when the Challenger rocket ship blew up. Being at school that day, we were all excited hearing about it. We knew that there was a teacher on board. We watched it at home. We watched it take off, only to see the tragedy unfold right before our eyes. And while I don't remember what he said, I do still have very vague memories of him giving a speech, which I know that Peggy Noonan had more than a little to do with. But he was someone who actually really spoke to the nation in a way that they understood. A character trait which I think is being lost in modern day politics. So yes, I did live in the US. I still remember most of the words of the Star Spangled Banner. I cannot remember the Pledge of Allegiance. That's probably for the best. But it is a real privilege to be standing here as someone who is a huge fan of the United States and being the one to help unveil this statue in the centenary week of Margaret Thatcher's birth. She would have been 100 this week on Monday. And for those of you who are fans of the show The Office, another great American-British collaboration, there is a great quote from Andy. Andy says, "I wish there was a way to know that you're in the good old days before you've actually left them." And I was born in 1980, right at the start of that era. So it's perhaps a bit much to expect me to have recognized what a fantastic era the 1980s were at that time. But that period of my childhood, when we had Mrs. Thatcher in office in the UK and President Reagan in office in the US, was potentially the greatest era in the modern history of the West. The prosperity and security which we enjoyed, and in many ways which we took for granted in the decades that followed, was actually won because of the hard choices that our two nations made during that period. Both led by two people with a fierce belief in their convictions, who seemed a match made in heaven for the Western Alliance. Margaret Thatcher famously called President Reagan the second most important man in her life after her husband Dennis. Some of her greatest achievements came out of her relationship with him, and I suspect it was the same for him. Both of them were in a way political outsiders. Both of them found allies hard to come by at home sometimes, but leaning on each other, they made one another stronger. And they achieved the most incredible things, both at home and abroad. We have the domestic parallels, both of them delivering the tough economic medicine our countries needed. Ronald Reagan slaying inflation, bringing morning again to America. Margaret Thatcher taking on the hegemony of the trade unions, healing the sick man of Europe, and unleashing generations of economic success. But I think probably their greatest legacies are what they achieved on the world stage, where together, through a shared strength of will and sense of duty, they led the West to victory over the Soviet Union and brought the Cold War to an end. They were both very charming and diplomatic people, and there's no doubt that relationship building was part of their success. But the fact is, it was their combined strength that made them so formidable. And in the years since, the West, I'm afraid, has paid nowhere near enough heed to Ronald Reagan's famous warning that peace is maintained through strength and weakness only invites aggression. America's leadership of the world in the years after President Reagan relied on that strength. And it's nice to think that decency and diplomacy can solve every issue, but it's naive to believe that it is enough in the real world. Peace is not achieved by kowtowing to tyrants. We make peace by being strong enough that our enemies want it to. And we are relearning that lesson today. This week's peace in the Middle East is a wonderful thing. To see the hostages released and aid going into Gaza, but in the end we must acknowledge that grandstanding and appeasement did nothing to bring that conflict to an end. As always, it was the wise use of power that did. In many ways, our nations have diverged since that glorious era of Reagan and Thatcher. I think that there is a lot that Britain could learn from America today, not just from the US leadership on show in the Middle East this week, but in some ways, or in some of the ways rather, that you have upheld the principles that President Reagan governed by. Right now, America has some of the cheapest energy in the developed world, powering the industries of the future. We want to see our resources in the North Sea used in the same way. America has a culture of risk-taking and entrepreneurialism. We tend to be a bit more reserved when it comes to giving things a go, but we know that Americans are much more likely than Brits to believe President Reagan when he said that government is not the solution to our problem, government is the problem. And my favorite ever quote from Reagan, and I suspect many others too, is that the 9 most frightening words in the English language are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." I'm actually heading to the US this afternoon. I'm going to the Thomas Sowell conference in San Francisco hosted by the Hoover Institute to learn some of the lessons about what the US is getting right. I think that there is time for us. There is a lot of hope and a lot of optimism that we can give the next generations. That doesn't mean living in the past or reliving the past, but it does mean learning from the past. I believe that it is time for us to build another Reagan and Thatcher-style alliance between our two countries. The future is out there. The future is bright. It is beautiful. I'm very grateful to be standing right here in front of President Reagan. He is someone who gave hope at a time of great difficulty. I know that we can do that again. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader Badenoch. Now we will officially rededicate the statue. I would like to ask our program participants and the Board of Trustees, Dave Trulio from the Reagan Institute, to come up so we can officially cut the ribbon.